This is Homeschool 101, a collaboration between ABS Television and the Ministry of Education. Stay attentive and attempt all activities. And now, today's lesson.
Hello everyone and welcome to Homeschooling 101. For today's integrated mathematics class, I will be going through coordinate geometry. So, at the end of today's lesson, you should be able to state some applications of coordinate geometry, determine the length, midpoint, and gradient of a line, determine whether points are collinear, distinguish between parallel and perpendicular lines, determine the equation of a straight line, relate the gradient of a straight line to the angle it makes with the horizontal line, and solve problems involving concepts of coordinate geometry. So when we think about coordinate geometry is a branch of geometry that specifies the position of points on a plane using ordered pairs that we refer to as coordinates. Now the points, usually in terms of x and y coordinates, are plotted on what we call the Cartesian plane. And here we have a Cartesian plane being displayed where the horizontal axis is our x-axis while the vertical axis represents our y-axis. Coordinate geometry provides a connection between algebra and geometry through graphs of lines and curves. It is used in various fields such as trigonometry, calculus, and so much more. Now, when we think about coordinate geometry, what are some of the real-life applications of coordinate geometry? How would you use coordinate geometry in your daily life? Well, when we think about coordinate geometry in daily life, we use coordinate geometry when we're looking at things like Google Maps, when we're using GPS, and we use it also in construction when we're sketching various buildings. So we will proceed to the first, which is finding the length of a line. So to find the length of a line joining 2 points, we use this formula. So the length of a line joining 2 points, A, with the coordinates x1 and y1, B, which is the second coordinate, x2, y2, is given by this formula here. So it is the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So given the 2 points, it is x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, and we take the square root. So to look at an example, it says find the length of the line joining A with the coordinates 1, 2, and B with the coordinates 4, 6. So once we're given the ordered pair, the first term refers to our x coordinate, while the second term is our y coordinate. So given AB, to find the length, it is simply x2. So in this case, we look, this would be our x2, this would be our x1. So we get our x1 and our y1 from our first point, and we get our x2 and y2 from our second point. So substituting in the formula, x2 would be 4 minus 1 all squared, plus y2, which would be 6 minus 2 all squared. So it becomes 3 squared plus 4 squared, resulting 9 plus 16, and that gives us the square root of 25, which gives us a value of 5. We then look at finding the midpoint of a line joining 2 points. So when we speak about the midpoint of a line, it's half the distance between the 2 points. So if we have here given A and B, the midpoint would be halfway between, or half of the length of this line. So to find the midpoint of the line, we simply take the sum of the x coordinates, divide by 2, as well as the sum of the y coordinates, and we divide by 2. So an example here, it says find the coordinate of the midpoint of the line joining A and B. So again, when we're looking at x1 and x2, we get our x1 from our first coordinate and the x2 from our second coordinate. As usual, the first term in the bracket, so this would be our x values, and the second term would be our y values. So to substitute, it becomes 1 plus 4, which gives us 5 divided by 2, and 2 plus 6, which gives us 8 divided by 2. So therefore the midpoint is 2.5 and 4. So we have an activity here. So the first activity, what is the length of the line joining the points A with coordinates 5 and negative 6 and B with coordinates negative 4 and 2? So make an attempt at this question. So what is the length of the line? So remember, use the formula for length, and the formula is simply the square root of x2 minus x1 all squared plus y2 minus y1 all squared. Okay, so we will go through the solution. All right, so to go through the length, the correct answer is actually D, 12.04. So to go through, we substitute again our x and our y values. So from A, we would get x1 and y1. From B, we get x2 and y2. Substituting in our formula and simplifying. So key thing to note, we must pay attention to the signs that are here. We know that negative times a negative, because y1 is actually negative, so it becomes minus minus, and we know that a negative times a negative gives us a positive. Hence this negative here becomes 2 plus 6, so the resulting is 8. Key thing also to note, we have a negative 9. Once we find the square of a negative number, it gives us a positive result. Hence, negative 9 squared gives us 81. So simplify, we end up with a value of 12.04, correct to 2 decimal places. We will then look at the gradient of a line. So the gradient, and we refer to a gradient using the symbol M. So the gradient of a line passing through 2 points. So we can look at the gradient passing through 2 points, A and B, is given by this formula. M is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. It is simply rise over run. And the gradient measures the increase in y per unit increase in x. That is the rate of increase of y with respect to x. So an example here, it states find the gradient of the line joining A with coordinates 3, 2 and B with coordinates 4 and negative 6. So again, we're using the formula M is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So again, we're substituting the values of y. So remember, to get y2, we look at the second coordinate, and to get the values to x1 and y1, we look at the first coordinate. So this becomes negative 6 minus 2 divided by 4 minus 3. So negative 6 plus negative 2, once we're adding and the signs are the same, once we're subtracting, the signs are the same, we simply take the sum. So it's 6 plus 2 gives us negative 8. Divided by 4 minus 1, which gives us 1. So to go through again, so we have 2 signs, they're both negative, so it becomes minus 6 minus 2 divided by 4 minus 3, that gives us negative 8 divided by 1. Once we divide negative 8 by 1, it gives us itself, which is negative 8. Then we look at collinear points. And points are collinear if and only if they lie on the same straight line. And once the points are collinear, they have the same gradient. So we have an example here. It states determine whether the following points are collinear. That is, they lie on the same straight axis or the same straight line. So essentially, because we have 3 points here, what we would need to do is to group the various points in pairs, and we find the gradient of each pair. Once we obtain the same gradient for the different pairs, we would know that the points are collinear. So if we're looking at the first 2 points, A and B, so if we look at A and B, we simply substitute in our formula. So again, we're using m is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So again, it becomes 5 minus minus 1, and again, we need to pay close attention to this sign here. Once we have two negative signs, they become positive because the negative times the negative gives us a positive. So it becomes 5 plus 1, and in the denominator, 3 minus 0 would give us a value of 3. Hence, we're left with 6 divided by 3, which gives us a value of 2. Then on this side, we look at the other pair of points, looking at B and C and finding our gradient. So to find the gradient, using again the same formula, y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So we substitute in our formula, it becomes 13 minus 5 divided by 7 minus 3. This gives us 8 divided by 4, which gives us a value of 2. So as we can see, irrespective of the pair of points that we use, we end up with the same gradient. Hence, we can say that the points are collinear and they lie on the same straight line. So we have a second activity here. What is the gradient of the line passing through the points A, 4, 6, and B, 0, negative 2. So again, to find the form, so again, the formula to find the gradient, m is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Right, so we will go through the solution. So substituting our values, 4, 6, and 0, negative 2. So when we substitute into our formula, it becomes negative 2 minus 6 divided by 0 minus 4. So we have two negatives, so we simply add and rewrite the negative sign, so it becomes negative 8. In the denominator, 0 minus 4, so then this becomes negative 4. So negative 8 divided by negative 4, the negative signs would cancel, and we're left with positive 2. Hence, the correct answer was D, or the correct answer is D. We will then proceed to looking at parallel and perpendicular lines. Now, two lines are parallel if and only if they have the same gradient. So if we look on this side, we would see we have two lines. They have the same gradient, m is equal to 1/2, and once they have the same gradient, we say that the lines are parallel. In terms of perpendicular lines bisect each other at 90 degrees, and they are perpendicular if the product of their gradient is equal to negative 1. So therefore, m times m1 would give us a value of negative 1. So, or what we could say, they are perpendicular if one gradient is the negative reciprocal of the other. Because if we're looking at this, if m is equal to 1/2 for the vertical line, to get the horizontal line, the negative reciprocal of that would be negative 2. Hence, we can say the lines are perpendicular if the gradient of one is the negative reciprocal of the other. In order for us to find the equation of the line, there are two methods that we can use. We will look at finding the equation of a line when the gradient and a point is known. So let M be the gradient of the line and x1, y1 be a point on the line. Once we know the gradient and a point on the line, we can find the equation using this formula. So it is y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. So in this case, we would make a substitution for y1, x1, which would be our points, and our gradient m. So an example, it states, find the equation of the line which passes through the point A with coordinates 2, 7 and has a gradient of 3. So again, we would simply substitute in our formula using y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. So looking at our points, our coordinates are 2 and 7. So remember that the second coordinate is our y value. So substituting, it becomes y minus 7 is equal to 3 times x minus 2. We will then expand the bracket, so it becomes 3 times x, which gives us 3x, and 3 times negative 2, which gives us negative 6. We then take the negative 7 across the equal sign, and we know that once a number goes across the equal sign, the sign changes. So here it was negative 7. Once it goes across, it becomes positive 7. We then simplify. Negative 6 plus 7 would give us a value of 1. Hence, the equation of the line is y is equal to 3x plus 1. So again, once we know a point on the line and the gradient of the line, we substitute into this formula, substituting the x and the y coordinate as well as the gradient, and we simplify to obtain the equation of the line. A second example, it says find the equation of the line which passes through the point A with coordinates 3 and 8 and is perpendicular to the line y is equal to 3x plus 2. Now the key thing, it speaks about perpendicular line. So in the form y is equal to mx plus c, we know that the gradient here would be 3. We are told that this line is perpendicular, the equation that we're trying to find, the line is perpendicular to this line. So because we know that perpendicular lines, the gradient of one is the negative reciprocal of the other, we can use the gradient from this line to find what the gradient of the line that we're looking for is. So in this case, the gradient is 3. Hence, the gradient of the perpendicular line would be the negative reciprocal of this, which would give us a value of negative 1/3. So using the gradient m to be negative 1/3 and the point 3 and 8, we can then proceed to substitute in our formula. So it becomes y minus 8 is equal to negative 1/3 times x minus 3. We go ahead and we multiply, we expand this side of the bracket. So negative 1/3 times x becomes negative 1/3 x. And again, remember the signs, we have a negative sign in the bracket here. And a negative times a negative gives us a positive. Hence, negative 1/3 times negative 3 would give us a value of positive 1. We then take the 8 across the equal sign, the negative 8. Again, once the negative goes across the equal sign, the sign changes, so it becomes positive 8. So y is therefore negative 1/3 x plus 9. And what we can do to get rid of the fraction, what we could simply do is to multiply both sides of the equation by 3. Hence, it becomes 3y is equal to negative x plus 27. Right? So a key thing to remember from this, once we have information regarding whether the line is parallel or perpendicular, we can use that knowledge in order to get the required gradient for the question. And remember, parallel lines have the same gradient, while for perpendicular lines, one is the negative reciprocal of the other, or we could say the product of their gradients is equal to negative 1. So as indicated, in the first instance, we looked at finding the equation when we know the gradient and a point on the line. In this case, we will find the equation when we're given 2 points on the line. So let A be the point x1 and y1, and B, x2, y2, be 2 points on the line. The equation of the line passing through A and B is given by y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1, where m is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. In this case, we're using the formula for the gradient. So once the gradient is not given in a question, once you have 2 points, you can use these points to find the gradient. Once you have the gradient, you will then select any one of the points and use the gradient in order to find the equation of the line. So an example here, it states find the equation of the line which passes through the points A, 2, 6 and B, 3, 1. So again, we have the 2 points. So the first thing we would need to do is to find the gradient using the 2 points. So again, the gradient of the line, m is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So we select A as our x1, y1 and B as our x2, y2. So substituting, it becomes 1 minus 6 divided by 3 minus 2. This gives us -1 divided by -5 divided by 1, which gives us a value of -5. So now that we have the gradient of -5, we can select any of these points. So using A and substituting in our formula, it becomes y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. So in this case, our gradient is -5 that we found in the previous section. And the points we're substituting, the first point, A, 2, and 6. So it becomes y minus 6 is equal to -5 times x minus 2. Expanding the bracket, it becomes -5 times x. So a negative times a positive gives us a negative. So we end up with -5x. And a -2 times -5, a negative times a negative gives us a positive, so we end up with +10. The next thing to do would be to take across our 6. Because 6 is negative again, once it goes across the equal sign, it becomes positive, so the sign changes to positive. So this then becomes -5x plus 10 plus 6, which gives us y is equal to -5x plus 16. So again, once we're looking at finding the equation of a line, we can find the equation of a line. In order to find the equation of a line, there are 2 things that we must have. We must have the gradient and we must have a point on the line. If we are not given the gradient, we must be given at least 2 points or given an equation where we can get the gradient from that equation if that line is parallel or perpendicular to that given line. So we have an activity here. We have 2 questions. So it states, what is the gradient of the line 3y minus 6x is equal to 8? And the second question, you are to find the equation of the line passing through the midpoint of 2, 6 and -8, 10 with gradient 2. So we will take a break as you work on the questions, and then we will return to go through the solutions.
You're watching Homeschool 101.
So welcome back. Hopefully you were able to complete the questions in the time. So we will go through the solutions. So for the first question, it states, what is the gradient of the line 3y minus 6x is equal to 8? What we would do is to take 6x across the equal sign. Once it goes across the equal sign, it's negative here. Once it goes across the equal sign, the sign changes, so it becomes positive. And then we divide throughout by 3 to get rid of 3 on the left-hand side. So it then becomes, if we're looking at y is equal to mx plus c, we would see that m is equal to 6 divided by 3 and that would give us a value of 2. Hence, the correct answer is B, m is equal to 2. Then we look at the second question here, where we are to find the equation of the line passing through the 2 points. So we're given 2 points and we're given a gradient. So it says passing through the midpoint of the point and the gradient. So because it states that the line passes through the midpoint of the point, so for example, if we have A and B, if we're told that the line passes through the midpoint, then it would pass through here, which is the midpoint. So therefore, what we would need to do in order for us to find the point or to get the point on the line, we would need to take the midpoint of A and B. So to find the midpoint, we use the formula x1 plus x2 divided by 2, comma y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So using these two coordinates, we substitute in the formula for the midpoint, and we end up with the coordinates being -3 and 8. We will then use this as our point on the line, -3 and 8, along with our gradient 2, in order to find what the equation of the line is. So substituting -3 and 8, as well as our gradient of 2 into this equation, it becomes y minus 8 is equal to 2 times x minus -3. And again, pay close attention to the signs. So expanding, this becomes, so to backtrack, so x minus -3, this would then becomes 2 times x plus 3. We then go ahead and we expand. So 2 times x becomes 2x, and 2 times 3 becomes +6. We then take across our 8. It's negative on this side. Once it goes across, it becomes positive. Hence, it becomes y is equal to 2x plus 6 plus 8, which gives us a value of y is equal to 2x plus 14. So the correct answer would have been C. So again, for this question, and ensure that you read the question carefully so that you know exactly what is being asked, so you can answer it appropriately. So in this case, we were told that the equation passes through the midpoint of the line with these coordinates. So what we would need to do is to find the midpoint, and having found the midpoint, we then use this along with the gradient to find what the equation is. And finally, we will look at the angle between a straight line and the x-axis. Now, the angle between a straight line and the x-axis is given by m is equal to tan theta. So essentially, the gradient of the line m is equal to the tangent of the angle between the line and the positive direction of the x-axis. For example, if we have, this is our x-axis and this would essentially be our line, what we're basically trying to find is that angle there, theta. So in order to find, and we're told that m is equal to tan theta. So an example here, it says given the points 0, 0, which is the origin, and 1, 3, we're to find the gradient of the line through the point and the angle theta that the line makes with the positive x-axis. So the first thing we would do is to find the gradient, and to find the gradient we use m is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So substituting the values, so it becomes 3 minus 0 divided by 1 minus 0. So if we subtract 0 from anything, it is itself. So it becomes 3 divided by 1, which gives us a value of 3. So we have our gradient 3. We are told that the gradient is equal to the tangent of the angle. So therefore, to find what the angle is, we need to take the inverse, tan inverse of our gradient. So therefore, theta is equal to tan inverse of 3. Substitute this in your calculators and you end up with a value of 71.56 degrees. So our final activity, it states the gradient of the line that makes an angle of 30 degrees with the x-axis is given by. And the second question, what is the gradient of the line that is inclined at 60 degrees to the x-axis? So we will now go through the solutions. So the gradient of the straight line that makes an angle of 30 degrees with the x-axis, the correct answer is C. So we're using m is equal to tan theta. So because we're told we're given 30 degrees, the angle of 30 degrees in the question, it becomes tan of 30 degrees. Then for the second question, when it states what is the gradient of the line inclined at 60 degrees, so we are told what the angle is. So again, using m is equal to tan theta, in order for us to find the gradient, what we would simply need to do is to find tan of 60 degrees, and that gives us root 3. So the correct answer is B. So we have come to the end of today's class, and we would have covered quite a bit. We looked at the applications of coordinate geometry. We looked at finding the length of a line, the midpoint of a line, the gradient of a line. We looked at collinear points, parallel and perpendicular lines, as well as the equation of a straight line, and the relating the gradient of the line to the angle it makes with the horizontal x-axis. What I would encourage you to do is to review this topic, as well as go through, practice, revise the questions, and really test yourself, because as indicated, it comes with practice, and the more you practice going through the questions, the more you familiarize yourself with the material, the better you will be. Right, so all the best until our next class.
You've been watching Homeschool 101, a partnership between ABS Television and the Ministry of Education. Thank you for viewing this lesson. Join us again next time.